This is our second talk in this series on silence, knowledge, and inner transformation. Our focus, of course, is to look at the role of both silence and knowledge in creating inner change. That's our focus. So we'll start with some silence again. And before we start this time, I'll read out a short, small passage from a book by the Norwegian author Karl Ove Knausgård. You might have heard of him. He's written quite a few books. One of his later books is called Morgenstjerne, The Morning Star. And it's an interesting book because it also speaks to issues of climate change in a very interesting way. And he also takes inspiration from the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard when he talks about a few things in that book, Morgenstjerne. So I'll read out this passage, and then after that, we will go into an experience of silence for some time. So this is a passage from his book, Morgenstjerne. In a strange way, what I read fell together with my being. I read about the noise of the sea, in the noise of the sea. I read about the whispering woods, in the whispering woods. And maybe some clarification is needed here. Normally, when we listen to sounds in nature, we associate these sounds with something else. These sounds have certain associations in our mind. And here the focus is, can we do away with those associations and just focus on what is it we are hearing, what is it we are listening, and keep the focus on that. So that's what he's talking about here. So once again, in a strange way, what I read fell together within my being. I read about the noise of the sea, in the noise of the sea. I read about the whispering woods, in the whispering woods. And when I read that praying is not to speak, but to remain silent, because it was only in silence that the kingdom of God could come. Then the kingdom of God came. The kingdom of God was the moment. So we will try and experience the moment and go deep into the moment, as deep as we can. Many people say, also with the practice of meditation over a long period of time, if we can go deep enough into the moment, we experience bliss. And they say that bliss, that joy, is symbolically, metaphorically spoken of as the kingdom of God. And there is a very famous book called The Kingdom of God is Within You. Probably that is also an implication of that. That if we can hold on to the moment and go deep into the moment, then we discover the experience of joy, bliss, which can also be healing. So we'll have a little experience now. So let's relax. Last time Ida was telling me, in meditation, it's also useful to know how to treat the body. So if there is some discomfort in the body, what do we do? If there is any pain in the body, what do you do? In my experience, at least, there is no need to trouble the body. You can move around. It's no big deal. Make yourself comfortable. If there is a pain in the neck, move it around. If there is a pain in the back, move it around. If the leg is getting numb, move it. It's perfectly fine. You can move in meditation. Make the body comfortable. It's very, very important to experience stillness. So let's start. You can relax, make yourself comfortable. And allow the body to settle down. Relax the muscles of your legs. Letting go of any tension that may be sitting in the muscles of the legs. Relax your stomach. And your chest. Relax your shoulders, your hands, relax the muscles of your neck. Pay attention to how the body holds on to tension in the muscles of the face. And relax them. Relax the tiny muscles around the mouth. And the eyes. And the forehead. And in this relaxed state, pay attention to what may be lingering in the mind. Perhaps some thoughts of the past, apprehensions of the future, concerns in the present. Whatever it may be, acknowledge it, put it aside. Try not to push it away. Try not to hold on to it. Just shift your focus away from these thoughts, from these sensations, to the silence that lies beneath. The silence in which all thought enters. The silence in which all sensation enters. Allow yourself to sink into this silence. Allow the mind to become so still that you can hear the silence. And just hold on to the silence for a few moments. And holding on to the silence. Allow your awareness to return back to your present. Allowing your eyes to gently blink open, ready to engage with your world. And ready to listen. So, yes, welcome back. In the last session, we were talking quite a lot about silence, and towards the end, we had touched the issue of knowledge. Of course, we didn't have time to go into it so much. Today, we will go into it in more depth. What kind of knowledge are we talking about? How does knowledge relate to silence? What kind of knowledge relates to silence? And what kind of knowledge can help us in deep inner transformation, including the transformation of difficult experiences of the past, including the transformation of difficult relationships, perhaps also. And perhaps also transformation in terms of bringing about a practical change in our life. It could be a change in a job. It could be a change in lifestyle. How do we decide? How do we know what is right for us? Especially when we are faced with inner conflict. And the conflict could be because of, say, for example, I have a job which is very comfortable. I'm able to make some money. Something inside me is telling I need to do something else. Is that a fantasy? Is that an illusion? Should I follow that? Should I not follow that? How do we know these things? Or say I've tried something for a long time, I've invested so much in it, like in the stock market, right? Sometimes we put in money and we're making losses, but we stay there because it's like sunk investment. Sometimes people sell and get out. How do we decide? How do we decide whether to sell and get out or to stay invested? Not in the stock market. That's not my area of expertise. But, with life, with the stuff that we have invested in, it could be a relationship, it could be a career, it could be a business venture. It could be anything. How do we decide that? So today we will try and get into some of these things, but again, I will speak only from my experience and I will use some words which you might be using in a different way. So my invitation to you all is to try and get the meaning of the words that I will be using. I might be using them differently, but I'm pretty sure you'll be able to sense the meaning, the underlying meaning behind the words. So the linguist Noam Chomsky, he has a very interesting way of looking at it. He says language has a surface structure and a deep structure. For example, I can say, I love Pierre, right? I can also say, Pierre is loved by Salman. The surface structure is different. The deep structure is the same. The meaning is still the same. So many times the words we use, the surface structure might be different, but the deep structure is where we actually can communicate, we can hear and understand each other. So let's try and engage in that kind of listening. We will have time to have a conversation later, and of course, we will do that. So, but let's start with that. I will again use some of my own life stories, and yeah, we will talk about knowledge and belief and faith today, and its relationship to silence also. And of course, overall, what does it say when it comes to transformation? So let's start. So we will talk about knowledge. I will try and write as big as I can for those online, but let's see how that works. And we will look at the relationship of knowledge to belief. And we will, of course, also look at the issue of faith. Once again, I will use some of my life stories. And I think I will begin with perhaps a story from my childhood. Faith, right? Faith. So it can be religious faith, but faith is basically some sort of a conviction in something, right? Conviction in something. Let's write that down here. So we are talking about conviction in whatever it may be. It could be a kind of a conviction, and conviction is a funny word because you also have a convict who is convicted of a crime. So that's not the conviction we are talking about. But this is the conviction that comes from being convinced about something very deep. There is a deep trust in whatever it is that we believe. There is deep trust in that. And we are very convinced by that. So we can be convinced by many, many things. Faith can be negative, it can be positive, it can be something else. For example, I might be very convinced that I'm an evil person. I could be. I might also be very convinced that I'm a very good person, maybe on the other side. I might be convinced in God. I might have a deep faith, as we say, in God, the existence of God, or some sort of a reality like that. I might be convinced that capitalism is the best way to govern our economies. I might be convinced that socialism is the best way to govern our economies. So there is a sort of conviction, deep faith in something. It could be anything. But we are talking about knowledge, and we yesterday in the previous session, sorry, not yesterday, but 2 weeks ago in our previous session, we talked about subjective knowledge and objective knowledge. Subjective knowledge is stuff that is generated from our own inner experience. We get it from the mind, and objective knowledge is something that we get from our sensory perception, and then something that can be observed and measured maybe and demonstrated and controlled and all that. And sometimes in our world, we see this hierarchy between different kinds of knowledge. So objective knowledge is better than subjective knowledge, and maybe for good reason, because how do you trust subjective knowledge? I may believe that someone is after me. How do I know that's true or that's a fantasy I have created? It's difficult. But at the same time, many things that we learn and many things that help us in our life can be subjectively acquired knowledge. And even though many philosophers have talked about the validity of subjectively acquired knowledge from our inner experience, from our mind, but we still have this understanding of objective is better than subjective. So at least in my mind, objective and subjective are both equally valid ways of acquiring knowledge. And when we are talking about knowledge, we are talking about some sort of an experience we have. At least that's the way we will approach it today. Some sort of an experience of something that we believe is true or false. This is a conviction in something as true or false or something like that. And belief, the way we will look at it today, is an understanding of something. So we experience something, we try to understand it in a certain way, we develop an understanding around it. And perhaps if the experience is deep and the understanding is clear, then we get convinced, we have the conviction this is how it is. So I'll start with a story. From when I was very, very young, I was sitting with my dad. So I used to go to one of these boarding schools in India where I grew up. I think in Denmark, we call them Kost school. So I lived in the, on the campus in the school. My dad would visit me now and then. So he was visiting me. It was a very big campus. So whenever my dad would visit me, we would go for a walk. We had some nice little forest and nice hills in the campus. So we went for a little walk. In the evening time, sitting on a bench, and I told Dad this. I remember this incident very clearly. I told Dad. No, Dad asked me first. So, son, are you praying every day? My dad was quite religious that way. Are you praying every day? And then I said, Dad, but God is my friend. He listens to me. And then I remember my dad saying, no, he's not your friend. He's God. I remember that. That was his way of understanding. But for me, it was like, he's my friend. And I think this is probably one of the first memories I have of that faith. I don't know where that faith came from. That faith that there is a God and he's my friend and he listens to me. What experience I had, I have no idea. Did I have any experience? I also don't know. But I had that faith. I had that belief and I was deeply convinced. And as I started growing up, if anybody would ask me, how are you sure that God exists? I would give rational explanations, right? Like, for example, somebody has to be there behind this nature. I mean, it can't just come by itself, right? There has to be some intelligent being operating it. How can everything just happen by itself? How can plants just grow by themselves? This sort of, what is it called? There's a word that people used, intelligent life thesis or something like that. I forget. That there is this intelligence that is governing the world. Otherwise, the world wouldn't be just like that. So I would give rational explanations about that. Can I prove it? Obviously not. But if I look at my experiences, I don't remember so much from my childhood. I remember a few things. One thing I remember is one night, I was very young. I was probably seven or eight, something like that old. I remember I woke up late in the night, around 2 or something like that. And I started praying. I prayed the way I was taught to pray, right? Those days. I didn't know any other way. So I started praying. I don't know why I felt like praying in the middle of the night. I just felt like it. I woke up, I felt like it, I started doing it. And as I started doing it, I had it was such a beautiful experience. I had an experience of so much love. Where was that love coming from? I have no idea. So much love, so much love. I started crying and crying and crying. And they were not tears of suffering or joy. They were tears of joy. They were not tears of suffering. I remember that. There was so much love, so much love. Where was that love coming from? Was it coming from within me? Maybe people will say, right? But the way I understood it then was it was coming from somewhere outside and I was experiencing that love. It was like that love was holding me, embracing me, caressing me, protecting me. It was a very beautiful experience. And I remember I prayed for like a couple of hours. Just like that. I remember that experience. Now we can say, well, I had an experience, right? Experience of something. What was that experience? The experience was I woke up in the night. I felt like praying. I prayed. And I had this experience of love. That was the experience. Now I'm trying to understand that. As a child, I never tried to understand it, but it can happen. Then I try to understand that experience and I say, oh, why did that happen? And I can understand in many different ways. So in this case, I develop a theory that it happened because I experienced myself to be in the presence of God, and that love came from God. But I can interpret it in many different ways. I can also say, well, it's just an experience. Something was triggered inside me, some neurons connected, and I experienced the emotion of love. But I believe it is coming from that source. Or I can believe that it's not coming from that source, it's coming from somewhere inside me. I can have different theories. But I try to explain this experience in different ways. So I say, well, this is happening because of this. And I develop a certain understanding. This is the beginning of my theory of life. In this case, the theory of God. I'm understanding that, well, this is why it is happening. Hello, welcome, Jens. So, and then we can say, the more often I have these experiences and the more often I keep relating them to this belief, I get quite convinced that this is what it is, my faith in God, for example. But could it be that my faith in God is creating this particular experience? That is also possible, right? I might not consider it. But could it be that I grew up as a child believing in God? I was taught to believe in God because that was the right thing to do. And I believed in God. And then when maybe that belief creates this experience. How do we know? It's a difficult thing. By the way, this is a conversation because I'm trying to figure this out myself. And more so because of another experience I had later, which I will also share with you. So is the experience a result of my faith? Or is the experience happening independent of the faith and creating the faith? What is actually going on? Because the experience, or let's say the belief, can also come from other sources. One is the belief, it's my understanding of my experience, but the belief can also come from the experience of other people who I have heard, right? I'm listening to them. My mother is sharing her experience, my father is sharing his experience, and my friends and whatever, my teachers and people around me, they're talking about their experiences, and I'm listening and I'm taking it in. And because I trust these people and I feel safe with them, and then I feel, okay, maybe this is what it is. So I develop a sort of a belief. It can also come from a certain social identity that I am growing up, with. It could be a sense of, say, if I'm growing up in Denmark, from childhood, I keep hearing about equality, and then I hear about gender equality, and I hear about socioeconomic equality. I don't hear about all sorts of equality because equality can have many forms. But I hear a lot about gender equality. I hear about the importance of equality. And everyone around me is talking about it. And I get rewarded for believing in equality. I can see people around me are rewarded for talking about, equality, believing in equality, doing something to create equality. And then these standards, I take them inside me, and I believe, yeah, equality is important, gender equality is important, and this is important, and this is how it should look like. So it can come from my experience, but it can also come from that outside source. So that's about any kind of a belief that we may have. It could be a political belief, it could be capitalism or socialism or whatever it is, right? So I develop a certain belief. I drive motorcycles. I like motorcycles, and I'm wondering why do I believe it is important for me to drive a motorcycle? Is it because of an experience I had of, I don't know, pleasure driving a motorcycle? Or is it because the environment in which I grew up in, motorcycles are supposed to be cool? I don't know. What I do remember is my uncles were these big people with big motorcycles. And they were like role models for me, and I wanted to be like them. Yeah. So where is that coming from? This is also an aspect of desire. We'll talk about desire in the next session, because desire is intimately intertwined with belief and knowledge and faith. But we will not go into that today. So I take it in from the outside, but it can also come from our own experiences. How do I discern? How do I differentiate between these two? Where it's coming from? And why is it important, first of all? Why should we bother with this? Why does it matter where our belief and our faith comes from? So there is some interesting research in psychology around faith. So there is something called extrinsic faith. This is a faith that is developed based on external experiences, based on rewards and punishment and things like that. Say, for example, as a child, if I'm growing up in a Muslim family, my parents ask me to go to the mosque every Friday, and then I go to the mosque, and then my father buys me an ice cream, something like that. I get attention. Or if I'm growing up in a Christian family, then my father asks me to come to church every Sunday, and then I go to church every Sunday, and then buys me an ice cream. So whatever it is, right? I get some attention. I feel safe in the world because I am following what everybody around me is following, and therefore I feel safe in the world. So that is one way that we develop faith, a belief system. And that's one way of experiencing it. Faith can also be intrinsic. Something that I experience from within me. It is not because of external rewards and punishments and things like that, but I experience something from within, and I hold on to it. Now, in psychology, people have tried to actually see what happens if you have an intrinsic faith or an extrinsic faith. An intrinsic faith is something that is deeply integrated within you. It relates to your values, not to cultural values. It relates to your inner values. It relates to your deepest desire, you can say. We'll try and capture some of these things, right? So there is this knowledge, you could say, of our inner values, deep inner values that are important to us personally. There is this knowledge, we talked about this also, of purpose. What is it that gives me meaning in life? There is this knowledge of our deep inner desires. What is it that I truly want in my life? Deep inside us. It can also come because of, for example, my uncle's driving motorcycles and therefore I desire a motorcycle. But it can also come from some other place. So we know, and the research in this area tells us that when the faith, whatever faith it is, and normally when they measure faith, they're looking at religious faith, right? Being a Christian or a Muslim or something like that. Extrinsic faith, if faith is coming because of external reasons, because of the other people around me and the social identity that I'm growing up with, that kind of faith is often related to experiences of fanaticism. Fanatics, people who are religious extremists, typically we see their locus of control is external. Their faith is not necessarily because they have experienced some deep experiences of that reality that they believe in, but because that is something that has been reinforced by their social group. And therefore we experience that kind of fanaticism. We experience defensiveness. And many a times I experience it in myself. If I believe in something without really having experienced it, but I believe in it because it has become a source of my identity. It is my place in the world. It gives me security. When people challenge that, I feel threatened. I feel threatened, and then I will try and defend that belief. In extreme cases, of course, it can become, fanaticism of some sort. We also see that it is associated with experiences of shame, and then we want to get rid of the shame. Intrinsic faith. If I believe in something, I have faith in something that I have personally experienced, and I know how it relates to my inner values, to my sense of purpose, and to my deepest desires. We know also that it is related to integration. That is, various experiences that I have, we begin to integrate them. Integration comes from the word integer, which is a mathematical word which means the whole. So we begin to integrate things, make them whole. They become a part of us. They become a part of us because they are related to these things, our inner values and purpose and our deepest desires. And this relates to a higher experience of well-being. We don't feel that threatened. We are actually happy. We also know it relates to forgiveness, for example. Whereas there is some interesting research in psychology on forgiveness, where we see that people who are extrinsically, or let's say people who have an extrinsic faith, an extrinsic religiosity, they find it difficult to forgive people. People who have an intrinsic religiosity, an intrinsic faith, it's easier for them to forgive people. Perhaps it's important for us to look at, where is our faith coming from, really? Is it something extrinsic? Is it something intrinsic? Because the implications can be quite different. So I'll try and illustrate this some more, and we will talk about it a little bit more with another story from my life. So when I was 22, many years ago, I'm 50 now. So that's 28 years ago, long time ago. I was exploring, right? I was very interested in spirituality and things like that. And I moved away from religion in my teens at some point, because those rational explanations that I myself used to give as a child, they didn't make sense anymore to me. The faith continued. I still believe that there is some entity, you can call it God or whatever it is. But the rational explanations, there has to be an intelligent life behind all the life, didn't make sense to me anymore, because there were too many philosophical problems with that. You know, one of the biggest philosophical problems I had was, well, if God created the entire world, why is there evil in the world? And if God is good, you know, all these questions. It didn't make any sense. So I moved away from organized religion completely by my late teens. And I was exploring various spiritual approaches. And in this process, I experienced meditation with a spiritual group. And I had a beautiful experience. It was like mind-blowing, beautiful experience. And I wasn't doing any drugs, by the way. Some people will say, well, maybe you were high. No, I wasn't. Never done anything, really. Pretty boring life. No psychedelics, not even weed, you know, quite boring. But I went for this meditation and I had a phenomenal experience. This time it was an experience of power, lot of energy, really, really, really good energy. And good, like, you know, these good feelings about the world and this desire, deep desire to do something good for the world. I don't know where it came from. I just sat in meditation. Somebody gave me a commentary, and I just slipped into a state which was so powerful. And that lasted for like almost an hour afterwards. I remember going out, I was feeling light. I was feeling so energetic. I was feeling like, yeah, I have to do something for this world. What was that? I don't know, but something I should do. World can be a little better than it is now. It was beautiful. Where did that experience come from? It was an experience that I had. And I don't know. You know, I can interpret it. I can create a theory around it, which I did later. And then I said, okay, I want to explore this meditation business more. And I got deeply into meditation then. And then I had other beautiful experiences. I remember I had one experience which was a little similar to the experience I had when I was a child. This was also like early in the morning. I woke up, I just sat down. I was sleepy. I said, no, I should meditate. And I sat down and I was meditating. And I had this amazing experience once again of love, as though I was held and embraced and cared for and seen. There was no physical entity there, nothing. But it was an inner subjective experience of being seen and being loved and being accepted just as I was. Beautiful. Where did it come from? I don't know, but I can have an understanding of that. And so I had quite a few experiences like that. I had experiences of lightness and all. And so I started having these experiences. And of course, we want to make sense of these experiences. What is going on? Why are these experiences happening like that? The way I made sense of it, based perhaps on my faith, was, well, it's happening because I'm finding myself in the presence of God. And the meditation practice also talked about the presence of God, and connection with God, and how that can transform you. So that faith became deeper. Now, was the faith creating the experiences, or were the experiences happening independent of the faith? I still don't know. But what I do know, it felt like that it was coming from this source outside me. So I kept having these experiences. And along with these experiences, I was going to the meditation center, talking to people. There is also a theory, right? I would talk about my experiences to others, and then they would say, this is why it's happening. Because there is a theology. That's how theology is often created. We have an experience, then we try to make sense of the experience. We create a theory around that experience, and that leads to a theology, a belief system of a religion, or any kind of a belief system like that. And people would explain, oh, this happened because of this, and this happened because of this. And yeah, that made sense to me, of course. Of course, it happened because of that, and this, and this, and this. And so I started taking in the belief system of that particular social identity that I was interacting with. In this case, the meditation circle, the spiritual group I was associated with. I started thinking, of course, the experience is true. I know that. And this theory is explaining that experience so well. So this must be true. And then all the other stuff that is coming with this theory, that must also be true, because this is the experience I had. And if a part of the theory is explaining this experience, then the rest of the theory must also be true, even though I have no lived experience of it. So there are many things in the belief system, right? How to live, how not to live. For example, I was told, well, you have to live a celibate life. No sex. That's the best way to be. That's how you can reach a higher level of spirituality. I just accepted it. Yeah, of course. Because these experiences were so beautiful. And if people around me who have also had beautiful experiences are telling me, well, if you live like this, then you can have more such experiences and you can really go deep into experiencing spirituality. That must be true. And many other things came with it, which I just took in. And over many years, that became a part of my identity in some way, right? Not because I hadn't had any experience. I had experiences. But then I also created a certain belief system around those experiences, which became a part of my faith. So my faith was informed both by my experience, because my faith can also come from my experience and my own inner understanding of why that experience happened. But the faith can also be mixed with something outside. I remember as a child, my parents were Muslim and practicing Muslim and quite spiritual. And they belonged to one of these reformist liberal Muslim groups. And they talked about peace and nonviolence and all that. And I liked it very much. It resonated with my inner values, you could say. And I remember once I was going with a group of total strangers to a religious event. There was a gathering where people would give talks and they would have workshops and things like that. So I was going with a group of total strangers. I was very young. I was like, I think 13, like early teens, right? 12, 13, something like that. So I was supposed to go and give a speech. I prepared the speech. And I remember we were all going in this bus, big group, and everybody was singing a song. And in that moment, I remember very clearly, very vividly, I felt the sense of belonging to something bigger than myself. It was beautiful. Now, if I have an experience like that, very often that experience is in a certain context with these group of people. And it's very easy then to believe that I can have that experience only with these group of people singing this particular song, following that particular belief system, going to this particular pilgrimage place. It could have happened if I had gone perhaps to another pilgrimage place with another group of people, with another belief system. But for me, it happened there. And so I feel sometimes this religious identity or any kind of a group identity is often associated with these experiences where we go beyond the self. We feel something great, something grand. We feel this experience of awe, but it's happening in that context. That context then becomes very important for us because we feel safety and security in that context. So I think with many of these experiences with my spiritual journey, that context of that that spiritual group, that meditation, that belief system, that became the context in which I was having all these beautiful experiences. And that became very, very strong. It became a part of me. And then what can happen very often, and it can, of course, happen, is then the belief system can experience some challenge, a confrontation. Suddenly something else happens, you're confronted with a different reality, and somehow there is a feeling of threat to that belief system. And that happened to me many years later, um, where I felt like, well, I had to change my life and live differently. Maybe find a girlfriend and a wife, something like that. Earlier, when these thoughts would come into my mind, I would push them away because I would say, well, that's sinning against God. I've given my life to God. And if I'm pursuing another kind of a life, then I'm sinning against God, and that's not nice. Right? I had deeply internalized that. But now these thoughts became quite strong. Maybe it was a premature midlife crisis. I don't know. I was around 40, so probably a midlife crisis, as many would say. But I had this experience. Along with that experience was this experience of shame, because I was probably being unfaithful to God, right? I was being maybe unfaithful to God. This feeling of shame and this feeling of threat and defensiveness. And so I struggled with it for a long time. And I didn't know who to talk to. I would talk to people inside and by the way, this has nothing to do with the group or the people or with the belief. No, it's all happening inside me. Yeah, they're all nice people. And then I would talk to people there. They would say, yeah, but because it's the same belief system. No, of course, you would be sinning against God. That's terrible. And that would make me feel worse. Then I would talk to people outside. They would say, of course, you have to get out, enjoy life, have sex. That's not what I want. I mean, it's something else I'm looking for. But that doesn't solve my problem either. And so I was stuck in a place where I didn't know what to do, who to talk to, who would give me an answer, who would give me knowledge. And I said, there is one thing that has been constant in my life from my childhood, in spite of the various different belief systems I might have had, and that is my faith in God. So then I just sat with that faith. I said, God, I don't know what to do. I'm having this inner feeling of conflict. I'm feeling ashamed. I'm feeling guilty also. How do I deal with this? I don't know. No one can give me the answer. I can't trust my own answers. I can't trust it. How do I? So I would just sit in meditation for hours, sometimes 8 hours. Yes, sometimes 12 hours. People would think that's crazy because I wanted a resolution and I didn't know any other way to do it. So I would just sit in that presence, which I thought at least I still think that presence. I would write a diary. I would write long, letters and reflections about what I was experiencing. And I would just place it psychologically in front of God. And I would do it again and again and again and again. And sometimes I would have this feeling of clarity that, yeah, I should move on. And sometimes I would still feel, no, this is wrong. I shouldn't be doing this. Right? So this inner conflict was going on. But I kept doing it. I kept doing it. I kept doing it. I kept doing it. I kept doing it over months. And I found something very interesting that happened. That feeling of guilt, that feeling of shame, it slowly just disappeared. It just disappeared. There was no great intellectual analysis, no therapy, nothing. I just kept doing what I believed in, what I had faith in. Over time, the guilt, the fear, the shame, all that just disappeared. And I was left with clarity. Yes, of course, I have to move out and try something new. I don't know what that new is going to be, but I have to try something new. Total clarity. It happened by itself. So that's where I feel sometimes that this experience of silence that, I like to talk about, it comes from those experiences because through silence, just allowing myself to separate myself from all these thoughts, finding a place for them, putting them aside, and just allowing myself to disappear deep into stillness again and again. And it's difficult, especially when you're experiencing a conflict. It's difficult. And I had sort of dedicated my life to a certain path, right? I said, okay, the rest of my life, this is how I'm going to live. It had become such a deep part of my identity. Putting that aside was scary. Scary. I have a good friend in South Africa. She's a priest. She's an Anglican priest and a psychologist. She used to be a part of the African National Congress when the African National Congress was a guerrilla movement, when it was a militant movement before it became nonviolent movement. She was a teenager and she got radicalized and she learned to, use AK-47 and all that. And then when the movement shifted from being a guerrilla movement to a nonviolent movement, I remember she tells me even today, she had an identity crisis because her identity was that of a militant. Fight, bring down the system, right? Bring down the government and create a new world. And all of a sudden we have to sit and talk and negotiate with the enemy, with the person who we have always said is evil. We have to do that. It was a big identity crisis for her. But she learned and she changed. So for me, it was, okay, not a guerrilla movement issue, but it was a conflict. It was a deep conflict. It was a challenge to my identity. But this is what I've experienced, right? You go into deep silence, and somehow in that silence we discover who we are deep inside. There is no need for a lot of intellectual analysis. That introspection that can happen. So we will, I will talk about often. I think about tools. What kind of tools are emerging from my experience that others can use and which I can also use? One is introspection that silence can facilitate. Deep introspection, looking at the self from another perspective, the helicopter view, sometimes people say. And this introspection can generate a very different kind of knowledge. We learn a lot about who we are deep inside, our values, our calling, our purpose, our deepest desires. The other possibility, which we can be quite afraid of, especially where identity is involved, is experimentation. And this experimentation also gives us clarity of who we are. Silence can facilitate this experimentation because it creates a space of safety in which we can actually experiment with new stuff. And that creates a different kind of knowledge, again, deep inside us. And this becomes very important for me, in my experience, at least, understanding our deep inner values, not our cultural values, but our deep inner values and our purpose. And by purpose, again, I don't always mean something we have to do in the world outside. No, that is one way of looking at purpose. We have to do something out there, fix the world and contribute to the world. And yeah, that could be one dimension of purpose. But purpose is also in experiencing meaning in just being. And I feel it's very important for us to cultivate that ability to just experience the meaning in pure being, existing. That's it, without doing anything. It doesn't mean we don't do anything. It's important for us to do stuff. But also, it's so important to experience that meaning in just sitting here, existing. That's it. I love going to Knuthenborg Safari Park. And I've often asked myself, why? And when I go there, I love looking at the llamas. The llamas are such peaceful beings. Okay, they can get aggressive, I've heard. I haven't seen that. They just sit there. They just sit there. They don't do anything. They just sit there. Look, they don't even care about you. They don't even look at you. They just sit there. It's beautiful. And I think if we humans can learn that art of just sitting there and enjoying the beauty, the glory of being, we experience purpose. And that may also liberate us from this compulsion to keep doing things, changing the world, fixing the world, That can also be anxiety driven sometimes, right? Doing things, fixing things, making life better for others, also for the self. Good. We should also do that. But first, do we experience the joy of simple being? But that we can experience, I believe, based on some experiences, through the experience of silence. And this knowledge becomes quite important for us because our actions, whatever we do, our actions, they need to be aligned to this stuff, our values, purpose, and desire. Because if they are not, we may end up creating trauma for ourselves. If I value love deep inside, say it's the most important thing to me, and I engage in an act of hate, forget about the trauma I've created for others. I have created trauma for myself because I've gone against my deepest value, my core desire of giving and experiencing love. I've gone against it. So in my experimentation, how do I ensure that I don't go against my own deeper values? That requires that I'm aware of my values. So yes, experimentation, I need to experiment, but how do I make sure my experiments are aligned to who I am deep inside? That requires introspection. And that, of course, requires silence. So yeah, I think that's it. That's it really for now, for today. And that experience of coming out of that belief system for me was a beautiful experience in many ways, even though it was quite anxiety ridden initially, but over time it became so beautiful. And honestly, my experiences of meditation became easier. Earlier, I would sit in meditation. Yeah, I would have some nice experiences, but it would take longer. Now, I should say this, I have those experiences every single day. Every single day, I have experiences of joy, of bliss. It doesn't matter what I've experienced. It doesn't matter if something terrible has happened around me. It doesn't matter. I sit down, I go deep into silence. I place myself in the presence of God. Whatever I've been experiencing goes away. 100% guaranteed. 100, not 99.9% of the times. 100% of the times, every single day. And that deepens my faith because it is informed by my experience. Of course, my explanation of the experience might be totally off the mark. That's my theory, right? But the experience is true. And then, of course, I have a theory around it, and that deepens my faith and throw it all out. But that's the thing. If we have the experience, even if the theory is challenged, we don't get threatened. We adapt. We look at other possibilities, other ways of explaining what I've experienced. There is no feeling of threat because it is not an identity issue. Right? We can actually experience a lot more openness through that. Any thoughts, reflections, questions? Yeah, we'll start with Ida.
Thank you for nice presentation or sharing your experiences with this. In my experience, you can also gain experiences through thoughts. Like you can relive or you can generate, if you think of something, you can generate a certain sort of experience. How do you know if your experiences come from a deep inner knowledge, like a deep inner experience, or if they are generated by thoughts that are generated by your belief system and your faith?
Yeah, excellent question. I don't know if I have the answer to that. I can only share with you what I believe right now. And what I feel is this. The proof of the pudding is in the eating, they say, right? Not many people like pudding, by the way. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. How do I know whether something is really true? I feel there are a couple of things. One is reliability. How reliable is that experience? Can I have that experience again using the same method? So for example, my experience, let me explain it to you with an example here. Whenever I'm experiencing anything negative, I go deep into silence. I let the thoughts be. I just slip into that silence. I place myself in the presence of God. At least that's what I believe I'm doing. And sometimes it takes just a few seconds. Sometimes it takes a few minutes. Sometimes it may take up to 40, 45 minutes. Not more than that, by the way, at least in the past few years. That negativity disappears. And I actually experience joy. Joy. Sometimes my body goes like this. I feel this surge of pleasure. And when I emerge from that meditative experience, I approach the world in a different way, which I would call the experience of virtue. So for me, the proof of the pudding is in the eating in this way, that if I can confront the same person who has upset me after my meditation with love, I'm probably doing the right thing. It doesn't matter again where it's coming from. I'm probably doing the right thing. I think that's the litmus test. Is my life getting better? Am I experiencing more well-being? And are the people around me experiencing me as a better human being? Am I able to forgive? Am I able to love? Even if I believe the other has said something or done something nasty, am I still able to love? Am I able to transcend? And is this reliable? Every time I do it, that's the experiment. Every time I do this, am I able to achieve those results? Then perhaps it is true knowledge and it is true experience. And then whether it's coming from my belief system or from God or who cares? As long as I'm experiencing a better life and people around me are experiencing a better life. So me, that's the litmus test. And I hold myself to it. If I am not able to do that, then I'm doing something wrong. So I don't know if that answers, but that's my experience with these things. More questions? Yes.
You spoke about this 8-hour meditation.
Oh, yeah.
But you said you were writing a lot.
Yeah.
And how do you differentiate between some? Because writing, I would think, was quite noisy.
In that way. So the thing is, sometimes to go into silence, we need some noise. We need to get things out. It could be talking to somebody, but it could also be just putting them down on a piece of paper. So that's important because you have to make space for whatever is there. Pushing things away, suppressing them is probably not a very good idea. So it does the work of maybe talking to a therapist, maybe in some way. So you put it out there and then you go into silence. So when I say meditation, what I would do is if something was on my mind, I would put it down on a piece of paper and then put it aside and then enter silence. That's the way I would do it. But I haven't found the need to write anything down for many years now. But I have done a lot of that before. You're right. So that's a strategy one can do. If you have access to a good mental health professional, it can sometimes be useful. But as Aparna said, sometimes that doesn't help either for various reasons. It could be because they don't understand the issue well enough or something else. It's a difficult thing. Yes, Leila.
I think what has been working for me lately is just to have a little more time alone by myself, because sometimes you meditate for half an hour and 1 hour later you're distracted by everything that has been distracting you before. So I just a couple of months ago had 1 week and I cut off all the unnecessary that was bothering me, and it was very helpful.
Yeah.
And I haven't been able to sleep ever since.
You haven't been able to sleep?
No.
After you came back?
I'm sleeping. Well, I've had a lot of thoughts, but I know I'm on the right path at least. I know that something happened because I had the time alone and I was more focusing on the box in the middle with the values, purpose, and this. And so I think if I experiment, I would experiment in a way that the content is the same, but the form is a little different. So I don't get away from the box in the middle.
But thank you for sharing that. And I think that's a very simple strategy. Take time out, which you succeeded in doing. But you were also fortunate that you could do it. For some people, it's maybe not possible, right? But also for you, I know how difficult it was, but you still took out the time. And I think that's a very simple strategy. And maybe those of us who want to experiment with that might want to do it. Just take time off. How many days was that, Leila? 10 days?
7.
7 days, 1 week. But that itself made a difference.
Yes.
Yeah. So normally I've experienced this myself when we have been very busy and, always on the go all the time, taking care of things. 1 week, I would say 2 weeks is good, but at least a week to just get out, because it takes about 2-3 days just to silence the mind, I think, isn't it? And then slowly you start looking at things in a different way. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So yeah, please take a vacation, 7 days. Leave your spouse back, right? Wherever they are, leave your job, whatever it is. Go somewhere for a week. You went to France, south of France, Lela. But I can suggest a wonderful place, by the way, if you want to try it out. Abisko National Park in Sweden. Great energy, great energy. Quiet, very well preserved. You don't have any chain hotels there. You have lodges because it's protected. You have the local Sami people there. Also very, very spiritual. You visit the local Sami community, listen to the yoik music. It's beautiful. Abisko. Abisko. Okay, now Pierre is planning a trip.
Where is it located?
It's in Arctic Sweden.
Is it possible to,
Lapland.
for you to say out loud the questions from the?
Oh, they can't hear, is it
No,
clearly?
it's a bit hard to hear.
Oh, okay, all right. So Lela was sharing her experience of finding that space where she could introspect and experiment with values, purpose, and desire by basically just going on a break for 7 days to the south of France and spending time by herself. She said she could finally create that space. And it gave her a lot of clarity about purpose and values. And of course, since she's come back, she's not been able to sleep because there are so many things to do. But then she does feel like she is on the right path in some way because of the clarity that she could experience during those days off. So one simple strategy of experiencing silence is creating the space for that silence. And sometimes that is simple. It's just taking some time off. Leave your family and your spouse and your job behind, and if you can, and it can be difficult for some, but if you can, just a few days. I would normally recommend 3 weeks, but that's a bit difficult for many people. But even 2 weeks is very, very good, and 1 week is also, as we can see in Lela's case, very, very good. So that's one thing. Okay, we also want to experience some silence before we leave, so I think we should do it now, shouldn't we? Unless you have anything else on your mind. Anything you would like to give voice to, Ida?
Yeah, I was just wondering, how do you differentiate between values and virtue?
Very good. So Ida has just asked us, how do we differentiate between value and virtue? Again, there is no one answer to that. I can only share with you how I differentiate between value and virtue. So for me, value is something that we deep inside attach a lot of importance to. It could be love, for example. Virtue is the behavioral expression of that value. So for example, what does it mean to be loving? That is the behavioral expression of the value. And it can be different for different people. For some people, the virtue, the behavioral expression of love might be listening to people very well. For another person, it might be helping people in practical ways. For another person, it might be, I don't know, driving someone back home after work. It could be different. So there could be different behavioral expressions to that value. So does that make any kind of, that's the way I look at it. Virtue is the behavioral expression of that which is very, very important to us. That is the value. Then let us spend a few minutes going once again deep into silence. Next session, we will go deep into the anatomy of desire. How do we know whatever it is that we want, whatever it is that we desire? How do we know that it is our own desire? It is authored by us and not by the world around us. So every time I do something good, how do I know that I am doing it because of my own inner understanding of who I am, or because the voice of my mom is telling me, if you don't do it, you're a bad boy, right? How do I know that? So we will try and go deeper into that as well. To sort of wind up, right, when we talk about knowledge, there are very interesting metaphors of knowledge. One is knowledge as the sword, like the archangel Michael is shown with a sword, and he defeats Lucifer with that sword. So the sword of knowledge, that is, knowledge can help us fight, confront difficult obstacles in our life. That's a metaphor of knowledge, the sword of knowledge. Then knowledge is also spoken of as the light that dispels darkness, one, but also something that shows the way forward. It's light. It shows the way forward. It gives us clarity. It dispels ignorance. That's another metaphor. Another metaphor, and this is my favorite metaphor, knowledge as a full vessel. You know, in English, we have the saying, an empty vessel makes a lot of noise. You take an empty vessel, drop it, it drops and it makes a lot of noise, right? If the vessel is full, you drop it, it goes plop. Knowledge gives us a center, gives us stability, gives us that experience of fullness, that experience of going plop, right? Then we can be stable. So knowledge is like that, I think. We'll talk about desire next week. Yeah, it is next week, this Sunday. Okay, let's see. So the trick now is everything that we have heard and we've talked about, we've experienced in the last 45 minutes, put it away. Put it away. It is relevant, but put it aside. Let's try and practice that. So let's relax once again. Allow your body to be comfortable and allow the muscles of the body to relax. And just imagine that all the thoughts and sensations in your mind are like particles of sand in a lake of water, the lake being your mind. And gently, all these particles of sand begin to settle down in the bottom of the lake. They are not thrown out. They are not held on to. But they settle down into the bottom of the lake of the mind. Making the waters of the mind still. And once again, experience. Allow yourself to listen to the silence within. The deep stillness of soul. Pure consciousness. And imagine, if you can, that this physical world and this physical body is fading away into the distance. All memory, identity is fading away. into the distance. And all that remains is pure soul silence. And you find yourself in the presence of the divine. And you allow yourself to rest in this comforting, all embracing, all accepting presence. Give yourself the luxury of rest. Resting in the presence of the divine. Just hold on to this deep stillness. This experience of being beyond for a few moments. And holding on to this deep inner stillness, you allow yourself to gently return back to the awareness of your immediate surroundings. Ready to engage with your world once again. You allow your eyes to gently blink open. And if you're in the room, look around you, make eye contact with one person and smile. Okay, thank you.